So I feel like I don't do a lot of like strictly recommendation videos on here. Mostly I just like gush or review or like make lists or whatever. But this is like a true recommendation. This is like, I need you to focus for the next 15 to 20 minutes. I know that's a long time. I understand that I'm asking a lot of you, and I know some of you may not make it. However, this is important. To me, to you, to the universe, to everybody involved. I need you to focus because I am here to recommend you a fantasy series, a high fantasy series. It's written by a woman. It is queer as fuck. It deals with past lives, reincarnation, body swapping, all of the above. It has magic. It has gods. It has dragons. It has pirates. It has kraken. It has vampires and werewolves. Sorry, not werewolves. Wrong series. It does have vampires though, and zombies. So I need you, please, for the love of God, to read A Chorus of Dragons by Jenn Lyons. Please, I'm begging you. This is all I'm asking for Christmas. It's Halloween, it's October, but I am asking as my Christmas gift that I need you to specifically read A Chorus of Dragons. I'm not fucking around here, you guys. I am not fucking around. So, oh God, I'm not God's strongest soldier. We're getting there. It's almost, yeah, no, this is, yeah. So here's the backstory. I was recommended this series about 2 years ago. Well, 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I decided to pick it up. And when I read the first couple of books, I enjoyed it. It was fun. I had some difficulty getting into it, understanding what was going on. And I was like, yeah, that's good. I'll probably read the whole thing. I don't know. I waited 2 years to pick up the next book. And by the time I got to about book 4 in the series, which I read about a month after book 3, I had just gone about it the wrong way. I listened to some of it on audio. I really didn't pay attention to what was going on. I took a huge gap in the middle. By the time I got to book 4, I was hopelessly lost. Like, I vaguely knew who everybody was. I kind of knew the plot, but I really had no idea what was happening. And it is probably the worst way that I could have read this series, because this is one of the most confusing high fantasy series I've ever read. And I have read high fantasy books. Like, you guys know, I have read House of Leaves. That shit is confusing. I've read The Locked Tomb. That shit doesn't make any fucking sense. This series does not make any sense until you get to the end. It took me about 4 books to decide that I was utterly hopelessly obsessed, head over heels in love with this series. And so it was hard for me to recommend this to people. I didn't want to recommend it as a fantasy series because I couldn't tell if it was good. I couldn't tell if I was stupid or the book was stupid. And I don't like giving people recommendations when I don't know the answer to that question. The good news is I'm pretty sure I was just stupid, and that's totally on me. But I also do think that this is not a series for everybody. I think it's hard to recommend high fantasy to everybody because you're asking a lot. This series asks a lot of its readers. You have to have critical thinking skills, which I know automatically takes out a large amount of people. But on top of the critical thinking skills, you have to have dedication, you have to have commitment, you have to have patience. You have to be willing to put in the time to not only understand what's going on, but also to wait until the story like fully develops into what it's supposed to be. And if you've read high fantasy, you understand. If you've read Priory of the Orange Tree, like, you get it. You know you gotta wait to get the good stuff. Some people don't want to wait. And some people start the series and don't finish it. And it makes me angry. And it makes me more angry that people don't know this series exists. This is going to be a recommendation to you. I am telling you, I am legally requiring you, if you are watching this, if you are subscribed to me, if you know me and you like me at all, please pick up this series. Please. And I'm going to convince you. I really am. I'm dedicated, you know? So before we get any deeper, I'm going to give you some comp titles. If you've read and enjoyed any of these books, you need to pick up this series. Number 1, The Locked Tomb by Tamsin Muir. I know I just said this, but specifically, if you've read Harrow the Ninth, if you've read Nona the Ninth, and you've made it through, and you have any idea of what's happening, or you at least had the good nature to go back and reread the book, and to kind of understand what's happening, then this is the series for you. This is a puzzle series, which is one of my favorite types of series. It means you have to put in the work. You have to kind of think a little bit harder than normal. But I promise the payoff is brilliant. It is beautiful. It is so well plotted and crafted. It's magnificent. I will also say, if you like The Locked Tomb has kind of its own vibe. It is very humorous and witty, but it is a very specific type of humor. I think if you like the humor and the general tone of the Locked Tomb, you will probably enjoy A Chorus of Dragons for the same reason. Which is to say, Chorus of Dragons is technically adult high fantasy, and so there are mature themes, there's cursing, there's, sex, all of that jazz. But I do say it does have kind of a lighter, younger tone to it, because most of the main characters, well, some of the main characters are kind of in their 20s. Ish. It depends. We'll get back to that in a minute. It kind of reads a little bit like a younger high fantasy series, but it's so complex that it is not YA. It is definitely adult. But that kind of brings me to my next comp title, which is A Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire. I've read A Song of Ice and Fire, unfortunately, and this is not that. If you're looking for something that is exactly like Game of Thrones, this is not that. However, if you enjoy the political intrigue, if you like the complex and convoluted family trees, a little bit of incest here and there, this could be your kind of series. It's not the same. It is nowhere near the same as A Song of Ice and Fire, mainly because it reads a little bit younger, I think, and it is much more humorous and not nearly as dry, but it is easier to read, and it's written by a woman, so jot that down. The next thing that I will say is if you like Dark Rise, or anything really by C.S. Pacat, I do think there is a little bit of overlap here because of past lives and reincarnation. If you've read Dark Air and you know how Dark Air ends, if you like that kind of vibe, this is not at all the same. It is nothing like that, actually. However, the body swapping, the reincarnation, the past lives, the romance through the ages, if you like that kind of vibe, this is the book series for you. It makes everything a lot more complicated in this series because people do swap bodies and get reincarnated, and it makes things very confusing, but that is a very prominent part of this series. That's what makes it so unique. The fantasy of all time, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. The real reason that this is on this list is because of the lesbians and the dragons, but mostly the lesbians. If you liked Priory and you liked reading about dragons and having a history with the dragons, I do think A Chorus of Dragons could be for you. But again, truly, it's the queerness of it all. The lesbians. There are lesbians in this series. But this kind of takes me into my next point, which is this series it's just so gay. It is arguably the gayest fantasy series I think I've ever read. And I think it's difficult because a lot of people will recommend things as like queer or gay or whatever. And they'll be like, oh my God, it's so gay. And it's like, it's a guy falling in love with a guy. And it's like, well, you're not wrong. Or even like Priory. Priory does a great job, I think, of branching out and having like a wide variety of queer identities, but people mostly know it for the lesbians, and that's great. We need lesbian fantasy. I'm not saying we don't. But I think what's so great about A Chorus of Dragons is that it explores queerness in so many different ways. Like, it does have MLM relationships. It does have FLF relationships. There are lesbians, of course, but there are also like arrow people and ace people, and there's trans people, and there's a polycule. It's a love triangle in the purest sense of the word, a true love triangle that every side is connected and every side loves and protects the others. It is so beautiful. And it is a wonderful love triangle, by the way. It's technically 3 men, I think. One of them has she, her pronouns, but I believe she's a man. But more on that in a second. It just explores queerness in such a wonderful, magical way. And I won't say that this is truly like a romantasy series. I think a lot of people are reading fantasy now to get romantasy, to get romance in fantasy. And if that's what you're looking for, this is not it. I'm sorry. It's not. Like, there is romance, there is sex, there is cute little love moments, but that's really not the point of the series. It's not the focal point, and it's definitely more of a B plot than anything else. And also there's just like not that many like super graphic, explicit romance scenes and love scenes. So if you're going into it looking for ACOTAR, this is not it. It's truly not. However, talking about queerness, it is more than just like relationships. I think one of the things that is so spectacular about this series is that it touches on gender in such a unique and wonderful way. And it happens in book 2. So if you get to book 2, you've made it. I do have to warn you that book 2 is a book for horse girls. I don't know why. I am working through rereading it and it's good, but it is for horse girls. However, this is the book about gender, and so it deals a lot with societal roles and societal norms and how gender is performed, specifically in one particular society in the kingdom. But it does a really great job doing it in a fantasy world that I had never expected. And it also touches on transness in such a unique way too. Like, so much of the gender in this book is about the idea of being trans without directly talking about it. Outside of this, there is also just in the world, there is a type of race that specifically is born male, and then it transitions later in life, like magically, like biologically, a part of their life into female. And I think it's a choice, but it's like a part of their biology that they just transition. And it is so cool. Like, it's just the things that she is doing with gender and sex in this series is unheard of, and I am obsessed with it. So I'm just going to give you a rundown of book one, like a quick, like, one sentence summary, because as you know, when you read fantasy, the first book is definitely indicative of the whole series. We meet this boy named Kieran. He is 15. He is blonde. He is the dumbest man you'll ever meet. He doesn't know that, but he is the dumbest man you'll ever meet. And he is so sweet. He is growing up. He is about to come of age, and he lives in the slums of the Empire. And he thinks he's an orphan. And so he's raised in a brothel, and he is just thieving around doing his best. He comes to find out that he is a long lost prince. And so he is shipped off to the capital, and he meets his new family, and most of them are very, very evil. They're just mean. They're rude. They're just the worst. But he figures out he's a prince, and he kind of starts there. He just starts there. And that tells you absolutely nothing. I can give you a brief overview of like the full series, but you're not going to like it because the premise of the whole series is that this entity, this person is prophesied to end the world, and a group of people gather together and rally throughout time and space to save the world. It's not really a chosen one story. It has elements of a chosen one story, but it's actually not at all. And it has a lot of similar vibes to different fantasy series. Like, it sounds very typical, you know, there's like this dark god thing that is maybe going to destroy the world. The sun is dying, and so the earth is also dying as a result of that. There are demons that are invading the living world. And all of this is bad. There's magic. The people are trying to save things, but they can't figure out how to do so. And the gods aren't really helping very much. And maybe the world will die in the end. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. As a whole, you may be thinking, Jenna, this really, I mean, it's queer, but it doesn't sound very unique. It sounds like every other fantasy series. And you know, maybe you're right. Maybe it is similar to other fantasy series. I disagree though, mainly because, two reasons. Number one, this series has everything you could ever want in a fantasy series. I think there are certain fantasy series that focus on very specific things, you know, whether it's like, okay, like magic or dragons or vampires or, I don't know, wizards or gods or demons or whatever, any of these things. This series has it all. It has all of that and more. It has gods, it has monsters, it has everyday humans trying to make a living. It deals with classism and racism and imperialism and sexism and religion and consent and sex work and slavery. It has magic, I said that already. It has immortal beings, it has shapeshifters, body swapping, reincarnation, past lives, space, ? Time travel, ? All of the above. It has pretty much all of the above, actually. And even that's still, it's like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, that's fantasy. We're used to it. It's fine. The real reason I'm recommending this series is actually none of that. It is nothing to do with the content, even though the content is great. The characters are fantastic. The writing is wonderful. The real reason I'm recommending it is because it is told in a very unconventional way that I've never seen done before. And it's so compelling to me personally, because if you know anything about me, I love meta literature. I love ergodic literature, books that are difficult to read because you have to put in the work to read them. And as such, this is why I don't recommend this series to everybody, because I do think it is a difficult ask. There's footnotes. And I know that right there will turn a lot of you off. But these books are written as chronicles. They're like reports, basically. And so they're written by one of two characters. And so the characters are writing out the perspective of people that they have gathered memories from, whether that's through telepathy or any other means, some kind of magic. And so they are writing this report to give to somebody else so that they know what's going on, so that they can continue on in the next book and do what they need to do. Book 1, for instance, is written by one of our characters, and he is writing to the Empress. And so he says, "Here, Empress, these are the things that I gathered. This is what I think has happened. I took some artistic liberties, but let me add some footnotes to give you some context, some clues, to tell you what I'm thinking, to make a snarky comment, and you can read it and catch up, and then the next time we meet, you'll know what's going on." And this happens throughout all of them. There's footnotes from all of them, all 2 of the characters. And so book 1 is written by one character, book 2 is by a different character, and then they kind of swap off as the series goes on. And it's brilliant. It is difficult at first to understand, but they actually provide a lot of important context that if you don't remember what something is, they will probably be like, "Oh, and by the way, like this is like a certain custom," or "This happens in this particular reason," or they'll just give you a snarky comment. Like, they love making snarky comments, and it's my favorite thing because that is the way that it is written, and that's how it turns out. It is a little bit convoluted. None of these books are really told in order. You kind of start at the end, and then you like get caught up to that point, and then you continue on with the story. You get thrown into the conflict very quickly at the beginning of the book. You have no idea who anybody is or what's going on. And then you spend the rest of the book kind of playing catch up and figuring out, like, where did the beginning start? How did we get ourselves in this mess? How are we going to get ourselves out of this mess? And that is so frustrating. I think it's a very tough call on whether it worked or not. I think some people could argue that it didn't do what it was supposed to. I think it did. I think it's a really ingenious way to write a book and to explore fantasy, because fantasy is usually just told in normal prose. And I love a footnote. I love a footnote, especially when it has a snarky comment and it's not just like, oh, like here's like additional information that you could look up somewhere else. Like, no, it is breaking the fourth wall, and it is so fucking funny. This kind of goes into what my favorite book is, but talking about like insanity. My favorite is the 4th book. It's called The House of Always. I think you could argue it's the best book in the series. And the reason it is the best book is because it's the most ambitious. The other books in the series deal with time in weird ways, and they're really well done for sure. But book 4 is the most insanely written book I've read in a very long time. I don't know how the editors managed to make it happen. I don't know how she came up with this in the first place, but it plays with time in such a crazy way. It has probably the most POVs other than maybe the last one. And it is batshit insane. Like, I am in awe of it. It is so ambitious, and it worked. It worked. It's the reason I like this series. And I can't explain it much more than that because obviously I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll just say the 4th book is like a bottle episode. And so if you know what a bottle episode is, back in the old days when sitcom was big, and they had TV shows with more than 10 episodes in a series, there would usually be an episode where all the characters are kind of like stuck in one place, you know, and maybe it would be they were trapped in a room or trapped in a car or something like that. And so everything in that episode happens in one place, and all the characters are kind of stuck together. And bottle episodes are really great because they explore a lot of like emotional beats. It is not about the action and the physical. It is about the internal and the emotional and like the interpersonal. You know, you're hashing stuff out. You're not allowed to go anywhere. You just kind of have to talk through things. That is what book 4 is. It is just emotional beats over and over and over again for 500 pages. It is most similar in my experience to Tower of Dawn. It feels like Tower of Dawn in this series. I cannot tell you how much I adore that book. It is just magnificent. It is very Jenna. It is just me in a book. But that said, it's difficult, you know, and it's difficult because the writing is difficult to get through. It's hard to like read a meta narrative like that. But I think on top of all of that, you also have the body swapping and the reincarnation in the past lives. And so it's just really difficult to figure out who anybody is, who anybody's related to, because people do lie and you don't figure out information for real until later on in the series sometimes. And so you have to know who people were in their past lives and what did they do in their past lives and who are they now and what are they looking for now versus then? Are they the same person? Are they different, etc.? And so, in order to combat that, I kind of went insane, as I do. I decided to be the change that I need to see in the world. When I was reading the first book, I really wanted like a visual guide, something that I could like pull up that's like one sheet that I could just say, oh, this is who so-and-so is. Here's how they're related to the other person. This is their past life. Great. Easy. And like there are the glossaries, there's the appendices, like you can go look it up probably somewhere. But you'd be surprised how difficult it is to gather information from those glossaries, especially because almost every single book the glossary changes a little bit. And so the definitions in book 1 are not necessarily the same as the definitions later in the series. I made this guide twice, actually. I made one for the first book because obviously you need one to start the series. And I also made one for the end of the series because I wanted to see how everybody was connected. And so I will be putting them in the description below if you want to look at them. Hopefully they're helpful. They helped me. But I went through all the glossaries. I reread some of them. I read some of them for the first time, and I used all the information from my Kindle to make visual guides. And I'm 99% sure that it's accurate. There might be a couple typos and there may be a couple things that I wrote incorrectly, but I'm fairly confident in my abilities to understand the glossaries. I did the hard work for you. I gathered information, and now you should be able to answer any question you might have, which means you have no excuse. And I've just talked your ear off for like 25 minutes, but I just want to remind you the reason we're here is because I would like you to read this series. And I want you to not panic when you read the book about horses. I know it's going to be weird. You're going to have to work through some stuff, but I promise you, Book 3 is fantastic. Book 4 will change your life. And Book 5 is really just like an overall great finale. There's a lot of really good stuff in the last one. I don't know. Hopefully I said something here that kind of sparked your fancy. I think there's a lot to love. There's a lot of stuff that could really hit your hot button if you like any of the things that I like. If you're big into high fantasy, period, I think this is like a need to read series. It is so phenomenally well done, and it is the lighthearted, funny series that I never knew that I needed. And especially living in a world today where so much of the fantasy is romantasy, like this is just a breath of fresh air. It is nothing like A Court of Thorns and Roses, and thank God for that. I told you already, my favorite book is the 4th book. My least favorite book is The Name of All Things, the 2nd book. I'm sorry, I'm not a horse girl. And if you're curious, if you want to know my favorite characters, I do really love Thurvishar. He is me. He and Senere both are like kind of ace and arrowy, and they just, I get them. They get me. We're besties. I love them so much. I love watching Senere's arc throughout the series. I think she just really comes into her own by the end, and Thurvishar is just the love of my life. But outside of them, I am such a huge fan of Count. I cannot express to you how much I love him. He is just my baby. I love him so much. And he's wonderful in the 2nd book, but in the 4th book, he goes through some stuff and it is just a delight to experience. I love him desperately. I love all of them, truly. Like the Polycule, the Hell Warrior Polycule is great. Kieran is wonderful. I love Teraith. I liked Janelle a lot on the first read through, but like in doing this reread, I really have come around to her. She is just insane. I love her so much. My favorite guy. I really thought this was going to be short, but as it turns out, I just needed to talk about this series. So if you do read it, and especially if you use my guide, please let me know, because I do need more people to talk to. I'm trying to recruit people for this religion, and there's only like 12 of us or less on the Tumblr tag. So please talk to me about it. Send me an email even. I would email. We could be pen pals. I'll do anything. I will literally do anything to get you to read this book. Please, I'm begging you. Yeah. And honestly, if you have any questions, like feel free to reach out. I could argue that I am one of the most knowledgeable people about this series now, because I have like lived in the glossaries for a couple weeks and I have made these very intense guides. So if you have questions, I probably understand the series better than almost anyone except for Jenn. So feel free to reach out. I will answer your questions. I will tell you who's related to who. I really wish I didn't have as many words in me as I always do, but maybe I'm just in a Hamilton era. Who's to say? Anyway, I'm going to go now, but thank you for listening. And please, I'm not kidding. I'm being so for real right now. You guys have to read this. Don't fuck around. Pick it up now.